So, when I was 11, I experienced my first 100-year flood. This is an extreme event that is, on average, only supposed to happen about once every 100 years. School was canceled that day, so me and my sisters put on our polka dot rain boots and went and splashed in the water. Obviously, I wasn't too concerned. I was glad to have gotten this event out of the way so young. But then, just a year later, another 100-year flood happened. This time, our red Ford Focus was parked in the street and water got into the engine. I was obsessed with this car, exclusively because I thought red was super cool. When it flooded, I was angry, confused, and I felt really powerless. I remember asking my parents, why is it called an 100-year event if it happens every year? Now, bear with me for a second. I love concerts. They are my happy place. That feeling of everyone singing and dancing together is just electrifying. I felt a similar energy at my first Women's March in January 2017. This was about 2 years after I experienced my first flood, and I was feeling angry and lonely at the time. I was scared for the future of gender equality. But going to that march really shifted everything. This is going to be a little video clip of a vlog I took of the march. Reminder, I am like 13 in this video.
Hi everyone, my name is Nabila and I'm a blogger. I blog over at How Cool Girl and I've been blogging since I was 8. This is my first ever video though. I did this because recently I went to an event that was really important to me. And it was an event about women's rights and equality mostly because in the past couple of months, I've noticed how genders, races, sexual orientations of everyone are still not equal, and it kind of makes me really sad. And so I decided to go to one of the women's marches, and this was the one in Austin. And I guess I just really wanted to share my experience with you.
Going to that march was like plugging into this giant ball of energy and determination. It gave me so much hope. Then, later that same year, Hurricane Harvey hit down in Houston. My dad woke me up at 5 a.m., and as I stumbled out of bed, I felt liquid under my feet. The water had finally made it past our front door. Me and my family moved to our living room and placed anything we could up high where we thought the water could never reach it, but the water kept climbing. I was scared. My grandparents lived next door, and I didn't know how we were going to transport 2 5-foot elders down a street filled with over 7 feet of murky water. Eventually, around 11 a.m., we were able to make it to the second story of my neighbor's home. As I frantically texted my friends to make sure they were safe, I watched out the window as my elementary school across the street was submerged. Eventually, around 5 p.m., a boat pulled up on our street, and we slid down this roof into the boat. To this day, one of the craziest things that has ever happened to me. The boat then took us to a local grocery store where people I had known since I was born were all gathering with their pets and family and friends. Eventually, open-air National Guard trucks came and picked us up and brought us to the George R. Brown Convention Center, where it seemed like the whole city was. At this point, my phone was almost dead, but I needed to understand what was happening to me. I Googled Hurricane Harvey, and I found an article saying something called climate change would continue to worsen floods. I was confused. I didn't really understand how something could get worse than this. After sleeping on cots with hundreds of people in the convention center, the water finally subsided enough for us to leave. But we couldn't go home. The water damage to our house was too severe. We moved into temporary housing while our home was torn down and rebuilt. Eventually, after about 2 years, we were finally able to return. But I still didn't know what to do. I felt really powerless. But as I read more about climate change and humans' role in it, I realized maybe, just maybe, I could do something about it. About 3 years after Harvey, when I was 15, one of my activist friends asked me to interview for a lead position in a climate science chapter they were starting in Houston. I was really skeptical at first. I had only done volunteer things before, never having led a whole group. I honestly doubted myself. But I took a leap of faith and I said yes. And that decision changed everything. From that random day during the pandemic to when I graduated high school, I had the privilege of building and leading the Texas climate science community. What started as just a small group grew to over 30 volunteers across the state. We educated young leaders, started school clubs, and even started talking to local school districts about integrating climate education into their curriculum. I will admit, we didn't always have a ton of material wins, but we built connections and laid the groundwork for future change. Doing climate work in Houston, Texas was not always easy. It's one of the oil capitals, and it's located in a very conservative state. This also meant, though, surprisingly, when we would table in parks, the most interesting conversations often came from those who worked for companies like Exxon or Chevron. One day, I remember this man approached our table, and I absolutely had my guard up, just moments before someone had completely dismissed our efforts. So I was a little bit on edge. But this man came up, and I began telling him about our mission and goals, and he didn't dismiss me. Instead, he leaned in, really engaging with what we had to say. And then, to my surprise, he shared about his own work at an energy company to build infrastructure for electric vehicles. Then, to make the day even better, his young son ran up to our table. He was about 5 and the cutest little kid. I remember asking him about his favorite animals, and we talked about how saving them was tied to protecting our planet. That pure joy and enthusiasm, the kind only a child can bring, became the highlight of my day. That experience taught me about how important it is not to dismiss people just because they may be different from you, and to build connections with those who initially maybe you think you may not agree with. This is essential if we want to create a shared vision for change. Another one of my favorite climate science memories was when we got to read one of our kids' books to second graders at the same school that I had attended. They asked the most thoughtful, curious questions. I remember this one kid asking whether we could harness potential energy to power our homes, and just thinking that was the cutest thing anyone had ever said to me. Their joy and curiosity about the world gave me so much hope. This is what collective action does. It gives you hope. Individual actions to fight climate change, like recycling, are important, no doubt. But if done in isolation, it's really easy to get discouraged. My activist journey has not always been smooth sailing. 5 years after Hurricane Harvey, a historic freeze hit Texas, and I found myself sleeping next to my grandparents' fireplace just to stay warm. Now, at 20, in one of the places that I thought might be safe from climate extremes, has just experienced a hurricane that is completely unprecedented for this area. I could have quit a long time ago, tired and angry that nothing was getting done at the pace that it needed to. But I haven't quit, and that's because of my fellow activists. One moment that I often draw on is when I was leaving for college. I got a message from the person taking over the climate science chapter. It was a video with the people I had worked with for over 3 years telling me how much I inspired them. That video brought me to tears, and I almost never cry. That video reminds me when I feel like I'm not doing enough, that it is so important to be making those connections, because sometimes, without even knowing it, you are inspiring and teaching others. So, why does all of this matter for you? Because we cannot save this planet on our own. We must have each other, not just to push for change, but also to keep our hope alive when things get tough. First, you need to find your issue. What's the thing you can't stop thinking about? What makes you tick? For me, it's climate change. But for you, maybe it's racial justice or poverty. Whatever it is, let it drive you. Next, and I would really implore you to think about this. What brings you joy? What are you good at? And how can those two things connect to what needs to be done within your issue? I really enjoy this graphic and helping me think about where I can best fit in the climate space. But insert whatever issue it is that you're passionate about. Next, find your people. It can be a school club, a local organization, or an online community. After that, start educating yourself and others. Start conversations, teach your friends and family. The ripple effects of small actions can lead to massive change. For climate change, one of the most effective things we can do is to talk about it. And remember, sometimes the goal isn't a big win. Sometimes it's about making those connections. This belief was really solidified for me this summer. Last year, I interned for Citizens Climate Lobby, a national climate policy organization, and over the summer, I was able to go to their conference and lobby day in DC. Walking onto Capitol Hill with hundreds of other like-minded individuals was incredible. Getting to talk to my representatives about climate policy and learning more about the inner workings of our government was incredibly empowering. But the thing that really stood out for me, what I learned the most from talking to the people around me, was that it's okay if we don't get those legislative wins this year, because we are making connections with the Congress people and building organizers so that we can get those legislative wins next year. For me, the most rewarding moments of being an activist haven't been the victories. It's been those relationships, the connections, and all the things that I have learned throughout this journey. Now, 7 years after my first Women's March, with the US once again pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, I sometimes still feel powerless. But when that happens, I draw on the strength of my fellow activists, and I remember that big changes often start with one small shared moment. So the next time you feel powerless, join a group. Start experiencing that collective energy that can only come when you are surrounded by people who care about the same things as you. Find your crew, and together you'll make things happen. Thank you.